How are you guys doing today? My name is Will Bartlett, and today I'll be presenting my public lecture number 2 over the physics and material science of superheroes by James Kakalios, which is the speaker. He is actually a physics professor or a researcher at Georgia Tech. So a couple things I didn't know is that the professor actually calculated the planet Krypton's gravity by calculating the force needed to leap over an entire building, solely based off of the comics. I thought that was really cool, and I honestly didn't know, and that brings this point up, that comics often do get more science right than we often think. And from this point, the professor was able to calculate the force needed to leap over a building, and then was then able to calculate the planet Krypton's gravity constant. Of course, on the Earth, it's 9.8. On Krypton's, it is something else. So with that said, comics are able to relate it to situations that are less in magnitude to superhero situations. And a good example is Spider-Man's girlfriend, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So this is actually real. The force needed to jump over that. And it's so real, in fact, that the professor was actually involved in a game because of this really cool discovery. And I thought that was really cool. It was a card game. So what I did know was about Spider-Man's girlfriend. She died because of forces in motion. Spider-Man came in a bad angle, and it actually killed her. Now, if he would have came in at a lesser angle with more swing, she actually would have lived, but instead she died. And that was also on, I believe it was the second mini test for Physics 2211, so that was really cool. So introductory physics isn't always relevant. However, comics do and can show how it relates to our physics in the real world. And another good example of that was the Spider-Man's girlfriend. She was a really good example of how classes like Physics 2211 can show the underlying principles of why someone could die, or forces that we don't necessarily see or feel. And then another thing that I did know that was pointed out in the public lecture, I just wanted to point it down because I thought it was cool, was that spider silk is 5 times stronger than steel, pound for pound. And one thing that's stopping us from just making everything out of spider silk is the way that we're able to gather it. Of course, we can put the silk gene into goats and create the silk from goat milk, but even that is really difficult to do correctly. So a couple things sparked my curiosity during watching this lecture. First, something that was pointed out was gecko lizards. They're able to wall crawl just as Spider-Man did with the silk that he uses, but instead they use van der Waals forces, where their feet possess a charge that changes rapidly, and then it matches with that of the wall, or is the exact opposite of that of the wall, and they experience an attraction. So that's how they are able to walk on walls, and that's pretty cool. Another thing that sparked my curiosity was the composition of Iron Man's suit. Um, as unrealistic as it is, it also can be realistic. Once we possess the power to make graphene in large quantities, graphene is a very, very strong material. So once we're able to do that, we could potentially make something as strong, if not stronger, than Iron Man's suit. So I thought learning about that and looking into that in a little more depth would be cool. So, some to relate to my area of study. First off, we've learned about the physics problem related to the forces of motion with Spider-Man's girlfriend. Like I said earlier, that was on one of the mini tests. And then also, we've learned about reciprocity in Physics 2211. That's, of course, Newton's third law. And that was actually illustrated in the Flash comics. So what had happened was the Flash was unable to touch anyone because he would kill them for some whatever reason. So instead, he used Newton's third law. He began to run circles extremely fast around a pear tree, which created a vacuum. He then ran at the ran at the villain, and used those pairs to actually knock the villain out because he couldn't touch him, because he would kill him for whatever curse or reason he had. And then also, what was mentioned was point of failure in materials, and I'm currently in MSE 2001, and it was discussed of tensile strength. And what was being discussed over tensile strength was graphite. Graphene and graphite are very strong, and their tensile strength is very high. But actually, silk has a tensile strength of 1,200 megapascal units, which is much stronger than steel at 1,000 megapascal units, which is really cool. So that kind of illustrates the difference between those two. Now, I did a little bit of follow-up, and it was kind of mentioned in the lecture, and I was unable to quite make out what he said. But the way that the flash uses the vacuum, it's real, actually. It's a real effect called the Rioli effect, or something to that nature. Sorry, I couldn't make that out. But the speed did the job for him. And that speed generated that reciprocity of Newton's third law, and then he was able to take the villain out using physics, which is really cool. So that's another way that Physics 2211 and comics kind of go hand in hand. They definitely fit together in the same bracket. And that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.